Jumping in at number 5, we have Belial. Belial, whose name in Hebrew literally translates to worthless or yokeless, was canonized as the leader of the Sons of Darkness in the Dead Sea Scrolls. If you didn't know, the Dead Sea Scrolls are an ancient Jewish text discovered in 1947, which are believed to have been written before 400 BC and refer to a wide host of demonic beings. Seriously, it's spooky how much they name drop them. In these scrolls, Belial is described as both the King of Evil and the Prince of Darkness, which has led many to believe that Belial is a pseudonym of the devil himself. Belial is also known as the Lord of Lies and the Master of Deceit. Many texts refer to Belial as a devious figure who utilizes fornication, wealth, and pollution of the sanctuary to get exactly what he wants. However, in the Satanic Bible, Belial's name is suggested to translate as without a master and symbolizes independence, self-sufficiency, and personal accomplishment. It begs the question, whose side is Belial really on? Coming up at number 4, we have Surgat. In Latin, Surgat literally translates to rise and is the physical manifestation of rebellion and opposition. His angelic opposite is Aquiel. To be honest, Surgat is a minor demon and is pretty weak sauce compared to some of the guys on this list. But the thing that makes him pretty terrifying is his brush with a particular pope. Written between 1150 and 1227, the grimoire of Honorius was written by Pope Honorius III with the intention of being specifically used by a priest. Pope Honorius was obsessed with the thought of Satan invading the mortal realm, and so began preparing the Catholic Church for a war. He wrote down his findings in this forgotten grimoire, which wasn't unearthed until 1760. Honorius began his training by purposefully summoning demons, and then banishing them again in a sort of weird, spooky, demonic boxing session. It proved quite effective, and the Pope soon started to get a handle on the armies of hell. He'd write down the name of each demon he fought and leave an elaborate explanation of their strengths and weaknesses. Kind of like a Pokédex, but for demons. That is until he came face to face with Surgat. All that was written in his section of the grimoire was that Surgat is he who opens all locks. That was the last demon that Pope Honorius noted down in his book. Makes you wonder what happened, eh? Next up at number 3, we have the Great Duke of Hell, Berith. Also referred to as Baal Berith, this guy is a pretty formidable dude. Known in the Infernal Dictionary as the Great Duke of Hell, Berith commands 26 legions of demons and is a pretty big player in the fiery depths below. According to Aleister Crowley's illustrated Goetia, those that attempt to speak with Berith soon learn that he's a formidable liar. Crowley refers to him as speaking with a clear and subtle voice, and is a liar when not answering questions. To speak with Berith, the conjurer must wear a silver ring and hold it clearly to their face in respect to the Great Duke. If not, Berith will consume the conjurer for not sincerely paying their respects. Berith is often depicted as a soldier, dressed in red clothes, riding a red horse and wearing a golden crown. His main function is to corrupt those that crave power, and is often found lingering on both sides of a war. In 1612, a nun from Aix-en-Provence was possessed by Berith. During the exorcism, Berith gave up his own name, as well as the names of all the other demons possessing her, but also the names of the saints who would be most effective in opposing them. That guy loves a good fight. Bringing up at the rear at number 2, we have Pazuzu. Dating back to ancient Mesopotamia, Pazuzu is the king of the demons of the wind. He is the bearer of storms and the bringer of drought, and is often depicted with the body of a man, the head of a dog, and the talons of an eagle. In the possession case of Roland Doe, the story that inspired The Exorcist, Pazuzu is the chief demon that possesses the boy. He is known to be an incredibly intelligent demon, and is renowned for scheming and corrupting the pure of heart. He takes most pleasure, though, from corrupting the purest of the pure, and is often depicted trying to possess children for sport. It is also thought that Pazuzu predates most other demons, and is thought to be an Oberith, an ancient evil that manifested itself from the abyss and has been tied to Earth for millions of years. Strangely though, Pazuzu finds reference in a huge number of ancient societies, from Mesopotamia to Sumeria to ancient Babylon. In some, he is revered as a savior and protector, others a demon who should never be summoned. Followers of the Oberith often carve wooden statues of the demon and worship him in the hope that Pazuzu will one day reveal his true name to them. No thanks. And coming in at the top spot, number 1, we have Azazel. Azazel, or Satan, or Lucifer, or the devil, or Baphomet. You know this guy. He's the king of all demonic possession, and he loves nothing more than a group of teenagers standing around a pentagram and beckoning him forward into the mortal realm. The Horn Prince is heavily related to the image of the goat, and we often see him depicted with hooves, horns, and a tail. But this actually has some substance to it. In Abrahamic society, a priest would whisper the prayers of a village into the ears of a goat, and then sacrifice it in the hopes that their prayers would be answered. But in fear of Azazel corrupting the goat, they select an extra goat, often referred to as a scapegoat, and use it as a decoy. They'd then send it out into the desert, hoping they'd wasted a little bit of time for the devil. Now, we all know that's probably not the case. He's a tricky one. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, Azazel is referred to in the Book of Giants and connects him with the story of the fallen angels. In this, he teaches men the art of war and also teaches women the art of witchcraft and painting the body. Generally, Azazel pops up in pretty much every possession story ever, and it's probably wiser just to avoid him altogether. Speak of the devil, and the devil shall appear. Kicking off at number 5, Andrus. A lot of you guys were pretty vocal about him making this list, so here he is, and I'm on board with your insistence because this guy is as vile as they come. In demonology, Andrus is an incredibly unpleasant demon whose only directive was to hunt and kill mankind, aided by his henchman Flauros. As the demonic Goetia goes, the demonic Andrus was a grand marquis of hell that appeared with a winged angel's body and the head of an owl, or sometimes a raven. It rides upon a strong black wolf and wields a sharp flaming sword. His main responsibility is to sow discord amongst humanity, teaching those who he favours to kill their enemies, their masters, and their servants. It is thought that he was often summoned by military leaders who would use his abilities to incite wars that would last for decades, resulting in a new definition for people, the planet, and the political landscape. Interesting. Next up at number 4, Valak. And no, not the nun. Well, kind of the nun, but yeah, not the nun. This guy is starting to get some real traction in popular culture, which, well, is kind of worrying. In the Lesser Key of Solomon, Valak is listed as the 62nd demon of hell, but is often attributed as a grand president of the demonic depths, or the city of jewels in several Sumerian texts, who thusly relies on his guile and manipulation of others. He is known as the Marquis of Snake, often attributed with the power to locate, summon, and control any serpent at will. Valak is often attributed to having the power of finding treasures, or in other terms, the power of divination and demonic insight, which he often uses as a means to discern his victims' true desires and tempt them with it. In the Dictionnaire Infernal, written by Colin de Placey and first published in 1880, Valak is depicted as a small cherub-like child with wings riding atop a two-headed dragon, which is an accurate representation of how he uses the appearance of guile and deceit to manipulate his enemies. Next up at number 3, the Botchling, which technically is a blanket term, but it kind of rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Whether you call it the Poronius or the Drekavac, this malicious demon from Slavic mythology is something that you should just totally avoid altogether. In Slavic folklore, these demons were believed to come into existence from stillborn fetuses, but also from improperly buried remains of children that had died during infancy. If you've played The Witcher 3, then you'll know what we're getting at. Not dissimilar to the Myling of Scandinavian folklore, these creatures are considered to be extremely powerful demons due to the innate potential energy caught up in an unrealized life, and their particularly tragic entry into our world. Still, there's hope, because as Slavic mythology tells us, if a botchling is buried beneath the threshold of a house, then instead it would turn into a klobuk, a protective house spirit, and then everyone's a winner. Coming in at number 2, Zeminiar. Sometimes you have to save the best for a special occasion, which is why there is pretty much next to nothing known about the demon of the name Zeminiar, and that's for a good reason. Zeminiar is one of the 4 principal kings of hell as aligned in the Ars Goetia, the evidential playbook for the who's who in the demonic realm. As demonology scriptures explain, Zeminiar, alongside his 3 other kings, Amaimon, Corson, and Garp, were all supposedly constrained by King Solomon and outlined in his Lesser Key. It is thoroughly noted that Zeminiar should not be conjured under any circumstances, with the sole exception of an end of days occasion. Zeminiar is the king of the north, and with him he brings death and destruction, and alongside his kingly brothers, they are often considered to be an allegory of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which is never a good sign. And finally, at our number one spot of scary demons you should never summon, Abaddon. And boy is this a big bad baddie. In the Hebrew Bible, the word Abaddon is a biblical term which literally translates to place of destruction, and literally speaking is a fiery plane in the realm of the dead known as Gehenna. However, in the later teaching of Revelation, Abaddon is often referred to as a being that had become one with the abyss and personified it as the angel of the abyss. In Greek, the equivalent for Abaddon is Apollyon, which literally translates to the destroyer, which is exactly what he is. In demonology, it is often cited that even a demon as powerful as Satan openly admitted that he wishes to avoid a confrontation with Abaddon. Yeah, he's pretty super serious. He's often depicted as a large human-sized locust, or in fewer cases an entire swarm of locusts that carry highly infectious diseases. Abaddon is said to be the plague of locusts called upon during the 10 plagues of Egypt and responsible for causing many atrocities in biblical times. In all seriousness, Abaddon is a complete enigma. At times he's often depicted as an angel of judgment, and both heaven and hell claim him as an ally, other times as an enemy. In most texts that speak of him, Abaddon is amongst the most feared of supernatural beings, having both angels, demons and corporeal beings fearing his very name alone. So yeah, don't summon him, guys. Kicking off at number 5, Chimaris. And boy is this name synonymous with the demonic art of war, also known as Chimeris or Chimes as the 66th demon laid out in the Ars Goetia, one of many 17th century texts that continues to be our source for all things demonology. It's interesting because according to Wade Baskin's Dictionary of Satanism, a controversial philosophy handbook written in 1972, Chimaris is a theoretical allusion to the Cimmerians, a warlike people mentioned throughout the classical period as living and dwelling in complete darkness. Chimaris is depicted as a godly warrior riding atop a black horse and possesses the ability of locating lost and hidden treasures. His primary demonic function is to mold men into warriors of his own likeness, bolstering his ranks into doing his bidding. In hell, Chimaris holds the rank of Marquis and is served by 20 legions. In Aleister Crowley's 777, Chimaris is attributed to the differing Hebrew spelling and is alluded to represent the Four of Discs, a manifestation of black light, which is also a form of the Egyptian god Horus and the alleged dawning of a new dark age.
Next up at number 4, Lamashtu. This is a pretty nasty one, and you'll soon see why. In ancient Mesopotamian mythology, Lamashtu is a terrifying female demon that preyed on children and women in childbirth. In Akkadian, she is Lamastu. In Sumerian, she is Dime. In few cases, she was worshipped as a malevolent goddess of demi-goddess and feared by the common people. She kidnapped children while they were breastfeeding and would gnaw on their bones and suck their blood. Despite that though, she was the daughter of the sky god Anu, the supreme deity of ancient Mesopotamian religion. Lamashtu was often depicted as a mythological hybrid with a hairy body, the head of a lioness, donkey's teeth and ears, long sharp fingernails and the razor talons of a bird. She is also commonly compared to the demon Lilith, Adam's first wife in Hebrew texts and Jewish folklore, who refused to become subservient to him in the Garden of Eden. Yas queen!
Coming in now at number 3, Astaroth. We're cranking up the heat now. Astaroth, also known as Astaroth, is the great Duke of Hell in the first Goetic hierarchy, alongside both Beelzebub and Lucifer, and makes up the third part of the evil trinity. This guy is ancient when it comes to the pedigree of demonology ranking, whose name is ultimately derived from the Phoenician goddess Astarte, a deity dating back to the 2nd millennium BCE. Astaroth first cropped up in the Book of Abram Melin, a Hebrew text written in 1458 and the cornerstone of most occult grimoires throughout the following centuries. In it, he is an archdemon, a great and powerful duke that commands untold legions of demons. He comes forth in the shape of a foul angel, sitting upon an infernal dragon and carrying on his right hand a viper. Astaroth seduces humanity by means of laziness and self-doubt, and also gave mortal beings power over serpents.
Swinging in at number 2, Mephistopheles. That's a mouthful. Also known as the much more convenient Mephisto, this guy is perhaps the most renowned demon in Germanic folklore. Originally appearing in the historical Faustian legend, in the legend the scholar, the historical Johann Georg Faust, wages his soul in a pact with the devil. In essence, Mephisto is the demon that does the dirty work for Lucifer, who doesn't walk the earth with the intention to tempt or corrupt mankind, instead seeks out those that have already already damned themselves to darkness. Mephistopheles often appears as a friar dressed in grey and commonly roams the woods and forest places waiting to stumble upon curious individuals. He does not advocate wrath of straight up violence, instead relying on the intellectual game of tricking the human mind into submission, seeing mankind as more of a plaything than any direct threat.
And finally, at our number 1 spot, Paimon, a demon that is both incredibly famous and incredibly mysterious, that is hard to tell which side of the coin you'll get. Paimon is named in the Lesser Key of Solomon, the Daemonium, the Dictionnaire Infernal, the Liber Officium Spiritum, the Book of Abram Melin, and the Grimoire of Pope Honorius, also in the new film Hereditary. But despite that, his origins still remain shrouded. Paimon is the 9th spirit in the Goetic roster, ranked as a king throughout Hell, and in historical text referenced to as the King of the West. He is referred to as primarily in necromancy, being listed as the commander of 200 legions of spirits and possessing the power to raise the dead from sand. He's also commonly found to corrupt priests and bishops, using them as pawns in his long, sprawling game of demonic chess. Paimon is described as a man riding a camel, often tailed by jesters and musicians playing haunting trumpets. Sometimes he is faceless, other times he has the face of a woman or a small child. He speaks in a hoarse, weak voice, conversing only in his native language of Hell unless commanded to speak the summoner's own language. My advice, just avoid conversation altogether. Kicking off at number 5, Abraxas, who is perhaps one of the most mysterious entities in the whole of the demonic Goetias. Throughout ancient history, Abraxas is referred to many times as an archon, an eon, a demon, and even a god. In the ancient theology of Gnosticism, Abraxas is continually referred to in the holy book of the Great Invisible Spirit as an aeon, a species of cosmic intrigue that inadvertently created the demiurge, a mysterious malevolent force of unknown intent. Abraxas really has been around for as long as anyone can recall, and his mystic uncertainty is what guides his rank in the demonic hierarchy. In Jacques-Colin de Plancy's Infernal Dictionary, Abraxas is labelled as the supreme god of the Basilidians, a Gnostic sect that were wiped out sometime in the 4th century, and whose motivation in history is unclear. There are a series of mysterious relics left behind though, a vast number of engraved stones dubbed the Abraxas stones, of which purpose no one really knows. Spooky. Coming in at number 4, Mammon. Mammon, who takes up a role as one of the 7 princes of Hell, who in more interpretable terms makes up the 7 deadly sins, is the demonic manifestation of greed. Mammon is widely considered to be a demon of Syrian origin. As Peter Lombard, the Bishop of Paris, stated, riches are called by the name of a devil, namely Mammon, for Mammon is the name of a devil by which riches are called according to the Syrian tongue. Bit of a mouthful. Throughout many ancient texts, the word Mammon crops up to describe an entity of greed and avarice. In John Milton's Paradise Lost, Mammon is referenced as a fallen angel who values earthly treasures over all other things. Later, in contemporary occultism, Colin de Plancy describes Mammon in the Dictionnaire Infernal as Hell's ambassador to England, which I'm not entirely sure if I'm insulted or not. Either way, Mammon has cemented himself a pretty cushy demonic existence by hoarding material wealth and corrupting others to do the same. Next up at number 3, Agrat Bat Malat. Possibly the daughter or granddaughter of Lilith, who we've covered here before, Agrat Bat Malat is a prolific demon in Jewish mythology. In Zoroastric Kabbalah, she is a queen of demons and one of the 4 sacred angels of sacred prostitution, who mated with the archangel Samael, we'll get to him later, and later became the 4th succubi. Her fellow demons and sisters are Lilith, Namer, and Ashteth. In rabbinic literature, she is known as the dancing roof demon, haunting the air with her chariot and her train of 18 messengers of spiritual destruction, which is pretty heavy reading, I guess. Agrat Bat Malat also occurs in ancient texts as the mistress of the sorceresses, who communicated magical secrets to Amemar, a prominent sage of Babylon. She is also widely tied up in legends of King David, where she bore him the son Asmodeus, king of the demons. Swinging in at number 2, Samael, who is a very interesting and oftentimes perplexing figure in theology and demonology. Samael in Hebrew is described as the venom, the poison, and the blindness. He is an incredibly important figure in the Talmud, where he is seen as the accuser, the seducer, and the destroyer, and is often regarded as both good and evil. Oh, and on top of that, he's the archangel of death. pretty big boots to fill. It's in the Kabbalah where his roots in demonology begin though, where he is tied to the demon Lilith, the first of the succubi. With her, Samael created a host of demonic children, including a son, the Sword of Samael, who you may know as Asmodai. In Gnosticism, Samael appears as the blind god and comprises 1/3 of the demiurge. Often through Gnostic texts, he appears as a lion-faced serpent and is perhaps one of the oldest malign references throughout ancient scripture. And finally, our number one spot, Leonard. And to be honest, I've been wanting to cover this guy for quite some time, simply because of his name, Leonard. The antiquitous pronunciation, of course, would be Leonard, but come on, it's Leonard. Also known as Master Leonard, as laid out in the Dictionnaire Infernal, he's the Grand Master of nocturnal orgies and demons. In folklore, he is represented as a 3-horned goat with a darkened human face. He marks his initiates with one of his horns and is often considered the demonic representation of the goat. In demonology, infernal powers obtained from the worship of Master Leonard range from metamorphosis into monstrous animals, or even causing men to fly as an incubus. It is often thought that Leonard is associated with the iconography of Baphomet, or the Goat of Mendes, a figure worshipped allegedly by the Knights Templar. In scripture, he was worshipped at black banquets held in Leonard's honour, where dead baby goats were eaten without salt and boiled with reptiles to deliberately spoil the meat. I mean, that's just a waste, really. Kicking off at number 5, Namtar. And this guy is pretty savage, although it kind of comes with the territory when you're the literal Mesopotamian god of death. Namtar, also known as Namtaru or Namtara, is loosely translated into destiny or fate in the ancient Mesopotamian language, and was considered to be a chthonic minor deity in the mythologies of the ancient world. Just a little side note, chthonic is an absolutely awesome word, and it literally means subterranean in ancient Greek. Chthonic, Cthulhu, I see what you did there. Namtar was considered to be the god of death and minister and messenger of An, Erechkigal and Nergal, the 3 major figures of ancient Mesopotamia and Sumerian mythology. He was considered to be responsible for diseases and pests, and it was said that he commanded over 60 diseases that emerged in the form of demons that could penetrate different parts of the human body. In other Sumerian texts, Namtar was widely considered to be the personification of death, much like the modern concept of the Grim Reaper, and he held dominion over the fate of mankind. Pretty heavy responsibility. Coming in at number 4, Rangda. In Balinese folklore, there are some insanely terrifying creatures known as the Layaks, a creature in the form of a flying decapitated head with bloody entrails still attached, that seek out pregnant women in order to suck their baby's blood. Well, let me introduce you to their queen, Rangda, and she is absolutely horrifying. In Balinese mythology, Rangda is the child-eating leader of an army of evil witches in constant battle against her eternal opponent, Barong, leader of the army of light and the forces of good. Good guy. Rangda is often depicted as a mostly nude old woman with long, unkempt hair, pendulous breasts and claws. Traditionally, her face is a horrifying fanged and goggle-eyed mask with a long, protruding tongue. It is often thought that Rangda played her part in the incarnation of Kalon Arang, a legendary witch in Javanese folklore that wreaked havoc throughout the late 10th century. Kalon Arang sacrificed her own daughter to Rangda at the Temple of Death and unleashed a great flood of death and disease. Gnarly stuff. Next up at number 3, Naberius. And this horrifying little dude first appeared in the grimoire From the Deceptions of Demons, written in 1583 by Johann Weyer, the famed Dutch occultist and demonologist. Supposedly, Naberius is the most valiant Marquis of Hell and has 19 legions of demons within his sphere of influence. His intention is to make men cunning in all art, but his most prolific intention is to make them cunning in rhetoric, the ability to influence with one's voice. Naberius speaks with a hoarse voice and also procures lost honours and dignities, as in, he collects people of weak morals. Naberius appears in the form of a 3-headed dog or a raven and presents himself with a loud and raucous voice, but speaks eloquently and amiable. Concerning the name of Naberius, it is often thought throughout demonic literature that he is associated to the Greek Cerberus, the 3-headed dog that guards the gates of Hades. In his grimoire, Johann Weyer considers them to be one and the same, so I guess this guy was making the rounds. Swinging in at number 2, Moloch. And now we're getting into some pretty gruesome ground in ancient history. Moloch, oftentimes referred to as Molech, Milcom and Malcolm, is the biblical name of a Canaanite god associated with child sacrifice. He often appears in the image of a large, ferocious humanoid bull dressed in flowing robes and golden tipped horns. Ancient rabbinical traditions depict Moloch as a bronze statue which is heated with fire into which the victims of his sacrifice were thrown. This is tied to ancient Greco-Roman texts that associate this act of child sacrifice to Carthage and their worship of Baal Haman. Moloch has traditionally been interpreted as the name of a god, possibly meaning the king, but is also pejoratively mispronounced with the Hebrew vocalization Bosheth, meaning shame. Moloch is the shameful king, a creature of metal and fire that consumed countless children in ancient civilization, and that makes him pretty terrifying. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, Asmodeus. And this guy is one of the biggest players in the entire host of demonic entities throughout literature. Asmodeus, also known as Ashmedai or Ashmediva, is a grand king of demons, or in Judeo-Islamic law, the king of the earthly spirits. He is mostly known for the deuterocanonical book of Tobit, where he is the primary antagonist and the great prime evil. Asmodeus is often referred to as one of the 7 princes of hell, where each one of these princes represents the 7 deadly sins: gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, pride, and the sin of Asmodeus, lust. This guy is perhaps one of the most prolific demonic entities in literature and appears countless times throughout mythological and religious texts. He is tied to the Testament of Solomon and the creation law of the Temple of Solomon, where he began a campaign of malintent against the legendary king. In the Malleus Maleficarum, he is described as having 72 legions of demons under his command and serves only his emperor Lucifer. He incites gambling and is the overseer of all the gambling houses in the court of hell. Now, that's a table I'd never want to sit at. And on that note, I guess the house always wins.